Hey guys, tonight we slip into the sandy hush of ancient Egypt, where the stars blink lazily over the Nile and the only thing louder than a temple gong is someone's morning breath. You're walking slowly, no rush here, across a stone courtyard still warm from the day's sun. You can almost feel the grainy dust under your sandals and catch the whisper of papyrus leaves swaying in the breeze. Everything smells faintly of incense, sweat, and onions. Lots of onions. Because guess what? In ancient Egypt, onions were medicine, food, offerings, and, unfortunately, daily lunch. Pair that with garlic, fish, and beer, and you've got a breath combo that could fell a camel. And yet, everyone around you seems blissfully unaware. Or maybe they're just used to it. Maybe you will be too, if you survive the next 5 minutes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how global this sleepy caravan has become. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're passing between columns etched with hieroglyphs, the cool stone soothing your fingertips. Your guide, an old man with a faint wheeze and the permanent look of someone who's just tolerated too many sandstorms, waves you forward. He doesn't talk much, probably saving his breath, literally, because, as it turns out, breath in ancient Egypt was a quiet concern. People didn't write songs about it or praise someone's minty freshness in epic poems, but they cared. Oh, they definitely cared. And not just for the sake of social pleasantries. Bad breath could mean spiritual imbalance, disease, or worse, the wrath of the gods. You arrive at a simple home. Mud brick, low ceiling, a small mat out front woven with reeds. Inside, a young boy sits chewing slowly on something sticky and brown. He gives you a polite nod but doesn't stop chewing. His mother motions for you to sit beside a bowl filled with herbs and dried leaves. You sniff the air. It's pungent, warm, earthy, like basil and old wood. Historians still argue whether these early chews were actual mints in the modern sense, or more like herb blobs that were sucked on for spiritual clarity. Some claim these were part of ritual purification. Others think they were simply the ancient equivalent of popping a mint before a royal audience. Either way, your jaws. The boy beside you offers one from the bowl. You take it. It's bitter at first, then oddly sweet. There's a hint of spice, maybe cardamom or cinnamon, though those weren't local. Could have been imported. Egypt traded like crazy, especially in herbs and spices. Some caravans traveled months to deliver a pinch of flavor. Your guide smiles with the faint pride of someone who's seen a lot of bad chewing technique. Don't bite, he mutters. Let it melt. So you do. Meanwhile, in a distant palace, a pharaoh is preparing for an important ritual. He's got an entire team tending to his breath, hair, robes, and eyebrows. Yes, eyebrows were a big deal. But breath, that's a silent killer. There's even an old proverb somewhere on a tomb wall that translates roughly to, "He who speaks to the gods should not breathe like the dead." And yet, in a society obsessed with the afterlife, breath had deeper symbolism. It wasn't just what came from your mouth, it was your car, your vital force. Lose your breath, lose your spirit. Stink up your breath. Well, Let's just say it didn't look good on your afterlife resume. In fact, the word renpit, year, was sometimes linked to cycles of breath and life. Not that you'll be tested on this later, but it's nice to know breath had some philosophical weight behind it. The night deepens. Crickets hum softly somewhere behind the house. The boy's already halfway through his second resin chew. He offers you another. This time it tastes faintly of honey and something smoky. Maybe charred date pits, another rumored ingredient. Possibly even a dab of cinnamon, carried painstakingly from the Levant. Your tongue tingles slightly. You pretend to enjoy it. Because chewing was serious business, especially in elite circles. Priests and scribes often carried tiny pouches of chewing herbs. Some were medicinal. Others were just socially smart. Not that it helped when everyone also used crocodile dung as sunscreen, but hey, nobody's perfect. Your guide gestures toward the door. You step out into the moonlight, belly slightly queasy from the resin, but your breath, surprisingly tolerable. A nearby cat sniffs in approval. High praise. And just like that, you begin to understand. The ancient Egyptians weren't that different. They laughed, prayed, traded, and yes, tried very hard not to knock people out with their breath. Tomorrow, you'll visit a temple kitchen where the very first recipes for pastils were mixed with reverence and honey. But tonight, you walk slowly along the quiet bank of the Nile, listening to frogs, chewing gently, and wondering just how much garlic the gods could really forgive. You wake early. Not because of an alarm, those haven't been invented yet, but because the Nile birds are staging a full-throated opera outside your window. Their chirps echo off the mud-brick walls, oddly harmonious with the clank of ceramic bowls being shuffled in a nearby courtyard. Someone is grinding something, and it smells vaguely sweet with a hint of unease. You stretch on your mat, tongue still feeling slightly numbed from last night's chew. It lingers like a secret in your mouth, some blend of herbs and resins that ancient mouths once trusted. You rise slowly, following the sound and scent into a small adjoining room where two women are hunched over a flat stone slab. One grinds cloves, or what might be cloves, into a powdery dust, while the other fans a charcoal brazier. They nod at you without pausing. This is a kitchen, yes, but also a medicine cabinet, a perfume lab, and, oddly, a social hangout. Welcome to the world of spice and sour breath. You sit beside a woven basket filled with scrolls, papyrus sheets inked with diagrams of plants and little side notes in priestly shorthand. These are excerpts from the Herbal papyrus, one of the earliest medical texts we've ever found. In it, among pages of instructions on how to cure crocodile bites and fend off bad dreams, are breath remedies. More than one. One section describes a blend of frankincense, cinnamon, and honey formed into little pellets. Another, far less appealing, mentions powdered goat hooves and barley beer. You wrinkle your nose. The woman grinding spices notices and smirks. "That one's for curses," she says flatly, as if that explains everything. Historians still argue whether these recipes were practical cures or symbolic gestures, maybe both. In Egyptian medicine, the physical and spiritual were tightly knotted. A stinky mouth wasn't just unpleasant. It could signal bad energy, or even an invitation for malevolent spirits to take residence. Think dental hygiene meets ghost prevention. One of the women reaches behind her and pulls out a small pouch. She spills a few pebbly beads into your hand. They're roundish, brown, and smell oddly nice, like an old cedar box. You pop one into your mouth. This is no modern tic-tac. It's gritty at first, then slightly bitter, followed by a slow wave of warm sweetness. You recognize honey again, maybe some crushed fennel, and possibly even a hint of cardamom, though that might be with. The women aren't just cooks or healers, they're scribes of taste, mouthfeel, and sacred recipe. And in a world without printed labels or dosage instructions, taste testing was probably a big part of the R&D department. You chew, they watch. You wince, they adjust. Outside, a camel groans, dramatic as usual, and somewhere in the distance, temple bells toll softly. The city of Thebes is waking, its marketplace preparing for another day of trading linens, fish, sandals, and mouth fresheners, apparently. But you're not leaving yet, because now they're boiling something. The air thickens with a syrupy aroma as honey gets mixed with wine and a hint of pine resin. It bubbles lazily over a clay oven. The woman with the pouch gestures toward the mixture, murmuring, "This one's for priests, stronger, fancier." Turns out the upper class didn't just chew herbs. They had access to elaborate concoctions, some even baked into tiny cakes or lozenges. Not candy exactly, but edible rituals. You imagine a high priest popping one before a long chant, hoping not just for fresh breath, but divine favor. And if you think all this sounds dramatic for mouth hygiene, remember, this is the same culture that invented eye makeup that doubled as infection prevention, wigs for lice control, and perfume cones worn on the head. Function blended with fashion, and breath fresheners were no exception. Back at the grinding slab, the women sprinkle ground herbs into the boiling mix, then carefully spoon it into shallow molds. They'll cool into little wafers, more bitter than sweet, more medicine than treat. One woman jokes, if it doesn't burn your tongue, it's not working. You don't laugh, mostly because your mouth is now tingling in a way that suggests imminent enlightenment or mild regret. She sees your face and nods. You're ready for the real stuff. She pulls a scroll from the basket and reads a passage out loud. You catch the words bad air, spirit wind, and breath of the underworld. It's an incantation, probably to accompany chewing, because yes, even breath mints came with their own bedtime prayers. You sit back, head a little light, chewing, slowing. The blend's effect is oddly calming. Maybe it's the resin, maybe it's the wine, or maybe it's the hypnotic rhythm of mortar and pestle, the warm, syrupy steam wrapping around your shoulders like a sleepy fog. Later, historians will stumble upon half-faded recipes and debate whether the Egyptians understood bacteria or just the symbolism of purification. Were these early mints medicine or myth? Probably both, and in that sense, they were ahead of their time. Not just fighting off fishy breath, but restoring balance, inside and out. The sun filters through the reed roof now, painting the walls with dusty gold. One of the women hums. The sun has climbed higher now, hanging like a molten coin in the sky. You're weaving through Thebes' morning bustle, stepping over baskets of leeks, clay pots, sleeping dogs, each with its own scent profile, none of them minty. Merchants shout in sing-song tones, offering oil, amulets, sandals, and something suspiciously called holy powder. You can't help but smirk. Marketing hasn't changed much, has it? But you're not here to haggle. You're headed to the House of Life, a scribe school and healing temple tucked near the riverbank. It's where scribes and physicians shared ink pots and body parts. In theory, anyway. Today, you've been granted a rare peek into their breath-freshening archives. Don't worry, no one's testing on you this time. You duck into the shade of a portico, the sandstone still warm beneath your fingers. Inside, it smells of ink, dust, and dried herbs. Basically, the world's first apothecary, crossed with a public library. An elderly scribe greets you, his robes stained with ochre and sesame oil. He hands you a scroll without ceremony, clearly assuming you can read hieratic script. You can't. But you nod respectfully and pretend it's all sinking in. He gestures to a low table where several items are arranged. A piece of linen with resin droplets, small pots of crushed spices, and what looks like hardened tree sap. One labeled Kifi, a sacred incense blend, yes, but also apparently chewed during evening rituals. Historians still argue whether Kifi was ever swallowed or just softened in the mouth for spiritual absorption. Some texts suggest it relaxed the mind and sweetened breath before temple sleep. Others claim it calmed deities. Either way, it was luxury-grade breath care, part incense, part therapy. You pick up a small lump. It's sticky, dense, and smells like the inside of a cedar chest buried under a spice rack. You try not to imagine how many priests gnawed on it before you. Best not to ask. The scribe chuckles, pointing to a small image in the margin of the scroll. Two men facing each other, one with exaggeratedly curly breath lines drifting toward the other. The second man is recoiling, clearly unimpressed. A 3,000-year-old comic strip. Possibly. Breath shame, it seems, is timeless. You wander deeper into the archive, past shelves of bundled scrolls and jars sealed with wax. Some are labeled with pictographs, a lotus for scent, a crocodile for strength, maybe metaphorical, maybe not, and a little beetle, possibly for protection or digestion. The Egyptians, you picture a sunburned priest after a long sermon downing this like some ancient Gatorade. Refreshing? Maybe. Tasty? Unlikely. As you sit cross-legged on a worn mat, the scribe reads aloud from another scroll. This one mentions daily chewing rituals, particularly for the upper class. Some chewed on twigs from the Salvadora persica tree. Yes, the same plant used in modern-day miswaks and natural toothbrushes. Others carried bundles of dried herbs in pouches around their necks, inhaling deeply before conversations. Breath-freshening aromatherapy, basically. He hands you a dried twig. You chew on it absently. It's a bit like gnawing cinnamon bark, if cinnamon bark were less committed to being enjoyable. Still, it works. Your mouth feels scrubbed, cleared, slightly numbed, like someone dusted your tongue with antiseptic sage. And then you find it. A tiny clay figurine with a comically exaggerated open mouth. Inside, a hole. The scribe laughs. "Whistle mint," he says. You blink. He pantomimes blowing through the figure, then pretends to faint from the scent. Apparently, these little mints were sometimes inserted into hollowed-out figurines or amulets. When carried on a string, they could be both breath freshener and protection charm. Blow gently, and you'd get a waft of clove and myrrh. Blow too hard, and, well, you'd spit clove all over your tunic. It's a delicate balance. You wonder if ancient teenagers used them to prank each other. Probably. By the window, you spot a young student practicing scroll copying. His brush strokes are hesitant but focused. Nearby is a list labeled Offerings for Ra, bread, beer, flowers, and pellets of sweetness. You grin. Even the sun god had standards. And why not? In a world ruled by scent, perfumes, incense, flowers, and rot, breath would have been a daily gamble. These little concoctions weren't just about freshness. They were part of a ritual life, a scented scaffold holding up daily order. Outside, the Nile shimmers under the midday sun. You step out, blinking in the light. The scribe presses a final gift into your hand, a small wax pouch sealed with reed string. Inside, a handful of tiny pastils. They smell of honey, lemon balm, and a little mystery. You tuck it into your satchel, feeling strangely modern. Ancient breath mints, chewed with purpose, wrapped in ritual, and surprisingly effective. As you walk back toward the market, you chew on slowly. The taste unfurls gently, like a dream you only half remember. Someone selling leeks waves at you. You wave back. You probably still smell like spice and ink. As afternoon lazily creeps over the city, you find yourself wandering toward the outskirts of Thebes, where the smell of river mud mixes with distant wood smoke. You're heading to a small herb garden, tended by an elderly woman whose fingers are stained green and brown from decades of coaxing life from cracked earth. Her garden isn't like the lavish temple plots full of lotus and papyrus. No, this is a humble patch, tucked behind a mud-brick wall, where she grows thyme, coriander, and a curious little plant with bright yellow flowers, something called henna. You kneel beside her, breathing in the warm, slightly bitter aroma of crushed leaves. She tells you that breath-freshening mints weren't just crafted in kitchens or temples. Sometimes they started right here, in the soil, under the hot Egyptian sun. Each plant, each root, was selected not only for its flavor, but for its medicinal and spiritual qualities. You notice the small piles of crushed leaves and pods she's drying on woven mats. She offers you a sprig of coriander to chew. The taste is sharp, slightly citrusy, with a cool finish that tickles your tongue. "Good for the belly," she says softly. You nod, letting the flavor linger as she talks about how certain herbs were believed to balance the humors, or the bodily winds, as they called them. Historians still argue whether these beliefs about internal winds were literal or metaphorical, but it's clear the Egyptians saw breath as a reflection of inner health. A foul mouth might signal imbalance, not just in digestion, but in one's spiritual harmony. As she points to a collection of seeds, you spot something unfamiliar. A tiny, knobby pod labeled Silphium. Your curiosity piqued, you ask about it. She explains that Silphium was an ancient plant prized across the Mediterranean, known for its strong aroma and digestive benefits. But sadly, it was so popular it disappeared centuries ago. The Egyptian scribes had recipes calling for Silphium in breath freshness, though no one's quite sure what exact plant it was. You chew a bit of the dried herb she offers, trying to imagine the scent. Earthy, resinous, with a faint sweetness. It's an odd reminder that some of these early breath mints carried flavors long lost to time. Nearby, a flock of pigeons coos, and you notice an old clay bowl filled with water and floating petals. "This is rose water," she says, dipping her fingers in. Rose water was often used to rinse the mouth or freshen breath, especially during hot seasons when the Nile's breeze carried less relief. You rinse your mouth with the fragrant water, and for a moment you spot a mortar and pestle and take it up, grinding a mix of dried mint, coriander, and a pinch of cumin. The aroma is surprisingly vibrant, sharp, earthy, and slightly spicy. She says this was a common homemade remedy for bad breath among everyday folk. Nothing fancy, just the earth's pantry turned into a little medicine chest. Interestingly, she mentions that some breath fresheners included crocodile dung in tiny amounts, used as a binding agent and believed to have antimicrobial properties. You try not to imagine what that tasted like. You remember this odd detail from the Ebers papyrus. Historians still debate if it was symbolic or practical, but it certainly didn't make the recipe any more tempting. You laugh quietly, thinking how far modern toothpaste has come. Still, there's a certain charm in the idea that ancient people were experimenting with natural ingredients to keep their breath pleasant, all while carrying a little magic in their mouths. The woman hands you a small pouch of crushed herbs, wrapped in linen. "For your journey," she says kindly. You thank her, feeling the dusty weight of history resting lightly in your palm. As you walk back toward the city, the sun dips lower and the air cools. You take a deep breath and let the herbal scents mingle with the fading warmth. Your mouth tastes of coriander, mint, and rose, a gentle reminder of a time when breath was more than just breath. It was a ritual, a charm, a promise whispered between friends and gods. You think about the humble garden behind that mud brick wall, a quiet sanctuary where nature and necessity intertwined. And as the city hums softly around you, you realize that sometimes the smallest herbs can carry the heaviest stories. Evening settles softly over Thebes, and you find yourself near a bustling kitchen tucked into a quiet courtyard. The scent of roasting meat mingles with spices and freshly baked bread. But what catches your attention is a small clay jar sitting near the fire pit, labeled simply "Breath Sweets." Curious, you edge closer, hoping to uncover more about these ancient Egyptian confections designed to freshen the breath. Inside the jar, you discover tiny round pellets, hardened lumps made from honey, frankincense, and crushed myrrh. The cook explains that these sweets were popular not just for their taste, but for their believed medicinal properties. Honey, long cherished for its antibacterial qualities, served as a natural base that helped bind the aromatic ingredients together. Frankincense and myrrh, more commonly known as temple incense, doubled as breath fresheners when chewed. You pop one into your mouth and savor the slow, sweet burn that dances on your tongue. It's oddly comforting, almost like the flavor of a secret ceremony. Historians still argue whether these breath sweets were considered a daily necessity for most Egyptians, or reserved for special occasions and rituals. What's clear is that they blurred the lines between medicine, magic, and gastronomy in a way that seems perfectly ancient and a bit whimsical. Nearby, the cook shares a quirky tidbit. Some recipes included powdered turtle shell, believed to cool the spirit and add crunch. You try not to imagine chewing on shell fragments, though it might have added an interesting texture to these early mints. The kitchen hums with life. Young apprentices stir pots, women braid dough, and the air swirls with aromas both sweet and savory. You imagine the ritual of offering these breath sweets after meals, a polite nod to the importance of clean breath in social interaction. It wasn't just about scent. It was about respect, personal presence, and maybe even the dash of flirtation. You watch as an elder guest unwraps a tiny linen packet and offers a pellet to a visiting dignitary. The gesture seems intimate, a quiet ceremony shared in the dim light of oil lamps. Later, you step outside and find a street vendor selling woven baskets filled with aromatic herbs, fresh fruit, and small bundles of dried flowers. A sign reads, "Breath Blessings," an old phrase for what we now call mints or gum. You wonder if any of these merchants traded in what might be considered the world's first chewing gum. Some scholars suggest that resinous sap from the acacia tree, chewed for freshness and oral hygiene, was a close relative to modern gum. It was sticky, sweet, and slightly resinous. As night descends and stars twinkle above, you reflect on how breath-freshening was both practical and poetic in ancient Egypt, a fusion of medicine, magic, and social grace. You took a few of the honey pellets into your bag, feeling the smooth, sticky texture through the cloth. They might be a bit old-fashioned for modern taste buds, but they carry a story sweeter than any sugar-coated candy. Walking home under the soft glow of oil lamps, you chew slowly, letting the flavors mingle with the cool night air. Your breath is no longer just air. It's a whisper of history, a connection to a civilization that cared deeply about the simple, intimate ritual of fresh breath. Night deepens and the city's pulse slows, but your journey into ancient Egyptian breath mints takes you now into a more private realm, the world of personal grooming and daily hygiene. Imagine yourself slipping into a small chamber lit by a single oil lamp, where a woman prepares her daily ritual in front of a polished alabaster mirror. You watch as she picks up a small, delicate box crafted from ivory, intricately carved with scenes of lotus blossoms and bees. Inside are tiny pieces of a fragrant resin, shapes like little pebbles, known to the Egyptians as kohl breathstones. These stones were not makeup, though kohl was famously used for eye decoration, but rather aromatic compounds chewed gently have freshened breath and soothed the throat. The woman places one stone on her tongue and allows it to dissolve slowly, releasing subtle notes of frankincense, cinnamon, and mint. The flavors swirl softly in your mouth, delicate and calming. This slow-release freshness was a luxury and a private pleasure, a way to prepare for social visits or sacred ceremonies. Historians still argue whether these breathstones were reserved primarily for the wealthy, or if simpler versions existed for everyday folk. Some evidence suggests that fragments of these stones might be found in both palace ruins and modest homes, hinting at a broader popularity than previously thought. As you linger in the quiet room, your attention drifts to the tools nearby. A small mortar and pestle, a bundle of dried herbs, and a ceramic jar labeled chewing gum. This gum wasn't gum as you know it. It was a sticky, resinous substance harvested from local trees, chewed to stimulate saliva, cleanse the mouth, and freshen breath. It was an early form of oral care that centuries later would inspire chewing gum's reinvention. The woman smiles as she offers you a taste. The gum is subtly sweet, with hints of pine and resin, a bit sticky but oddly soothing. You imagine chewing this as you stroll the bustling streets, the resin's fresh scent warding off the dust and dryness of the desert air. An unexpected detail catches your eye. A tiny spoon filled with powdered natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture famous for its cleansing properties. She dips a small amount onto her tongue, explaining that natron was believed to purify the mouth, freshen breath, and protect against decay. You recall that natron was also essential for mummification, a reminder that the Egyptians associated cleanliness and preservation with both the body and the soul. You can almost hear the distant laughter from the courtyard and smell the scent of baked bread carried through the open windows. The breathstones and gum were not just tools. They were companions for daily life, moments of calm in an otherwise busy world. As you settle back, the woman whispers about how some Egyptians believed breath could carry one's. You nod quietly, letting the flavors and stories meld into the quiet hum of the night. Breath was never just breath. It was connection, care, and a little bit of magic, tucked inside the daily rituals of an ancient civilization. You wake gently the next morning to the soft light filtering through papyrus blinds, casting long, lazy shadows across the courtyard. The scent of fresh bread baking drifts to you as you sit by a small wooden table. Here you discover an ancient papyrus scroll carefully unrolled, a recipe for breath fresheners, penned by a scribe whose elegant handwriting invites you deeper into the daily life of an ancient Egyptian household. The scroll details a mixture of crushed coriander seeds, honey, and a pinch of myrrh resin, ground finely and pressed into small lozenges. These early breath sweets were easy to carry, meant to be shared at banquets or offered during polite conversation. The recipe suggests storing them wrapped in soft linen, a small luxury that kept the flavors fresh and the sweetness intact. Historians still argue whether such sweets were commonly used by all classes or primarily by the elite, yet fragments of these lozenges have been found in both grand tombs and modest village homes, suggesting that breath care was a widespread practice. You try to picture yourself at a bustling feast, surrounded by friends and strangers, offering these small confections as a sign of goodwill and respect. It's a gesture not unlike offering gum or mints today, but with an air of sacredness and social grace. The papyrus also includes an intriguing aside, a note about a more peculiar ingredient, powdered ostrich eggshell. Supposedly, it added a slight crunch and was thought to strengthen the breath. You imagine the curious texture, a contrast to the sticky honey and soft resin. Nearby, a carved wooden box contains a miniature fan made from palm leaves, used to waft pleasant aromas during meals. You breathe in its faint scent of lotus and cedarwood, imagining how these subtle fragrances complemented the taste and smell of the breath fresheners. Your mind drifts to the kitchens where cooks would prepare these lozenges, mixing, pressing, and drying under the warm Egyptian sun. The process was slow, deliberate, and carefully guarded as a family secret. As you roll a small, honey-coated pellet between your fingers, you recall a curious belief. Some Egyptians thought that chewing these sweets could protect the mouth from evil spirits, those pesky little metaphysical nuisances thought to cause bad breath and discomfort. You chuckle softly, picturing the ancient version of mouthwash that involved not just hygiene, but spiritual defense. It's a reminder that for the Egyptians, health was inseparable from magic and faith. Outside, the Nile's breeze carries the distant sound of fishermen casting nets and children's laughter. You tuck the scroll back into its worn leather case. Breath fresheners weren't merely medicinal. They were woven into the fabric of everyday life. A gentle reminder that even thousands of years ago, people cared about how they smelled, how they felt, and how they connected. You step into a quieter part of the city now, where the scent of herbs and flowers fills the air. The marketplace buzzes gently with merchants selling fragrant oils, dried herbs, and small pouches of spices meant for personal use. Among the stalls, one stands out, a humble vendor offering tiny bundles of fennel seeds, cinnamon sticks, and dried mint leaves wrapped in soft linen. These bundles, he explains, were popular breath fresheners in ancient Egypt, used long before the lozenges and resin gums became widespread. You pick up a small packet of fennel seeds and place a few in your mouth. The flavor is slightly sweet, with a cool, refreshing aftertaste that lingers just enough to soothe. It's easy to imagine Egyptians nibbling on these seeds after meals, perhaps while reclining on cushions in the shade, letting the spices work their gentle magic. Historians still debate whether these seed bundles were mostly practical or if they held a deeper symbolic meaning related to fertility and vitality. Some believe chewing fennel and mint was not only for fresh breath, but also to promote digestion and overall well-being, a fascinating blend of health and ritual. Nearby, an elderly woman recalls the curious custom of breath offering, where loved ones would present aromatic herbs to each other as a sign of affection or respect. You smile softly, imagining this gentle exchange under the warm desert sun, a subtle way of saying, "I care," without words. You notice that many of the herbs sold here overlap with those used in religious ceremonies: frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, highlighting how breath freshening was linked to the sacred as well as the social. The idea of fresh breath transcended mere hygiene. It was about presence, respect, and spiritual cleanliness. As you wander through the market, you find yourself drawn to a small, intricately carved box filled with dried lotus petals. Chewing lotus was said to calm the mind and soothe the throat, making it a favored remedy for those who spoke often or sang in temples. You pop a petal into your mouth and feel its soft, slightly sweet flavor unfold slowly, a gentle reminder of the connection between nature and daily life in ancient Egypt. A local herbalist tells you that some Egyptians combined lotus petals with honey and ground herbs to create a paste, an early form of breath mint that could be shaped into small discs and carried on the go. You imagine the convenience of such a remedy, especially in a land where the sun's heat and the Nile's dust could quickly turn breath stale. As the sun begins to dip, you find yourself wandering along the Nile's gentle banks, where the air is thick with the mingling scents of river plants and freshly baked bread from nearby ovens. Here, in the quiet moments by the water, you discover another layer to the story of ancient Egyptian breath mints, their surprisingly sophisticated use of natural fermentation. You watch as a potter's apprentice carefully uncorks a small ceramic jar filled with a dark, syrupy liquid. It's date wine, a common drink, but also a key ingredient in an early breath freshener recipe. The sweet, tangy nectar was combined with crushed herbs and resins, then allowed to ferment gently, creating a breath sweetener with both medicinal and social appeal. Historians still argue whether these fermented mixtures were mainly used by priests in sacred rituals, or enjoyed by ordinary citizens seeking to mask the less pleasant odors of daily life. But the evidence of such blends in tomb kitchens suggests they were fairly common. You're handed a tiny drop on your finger and taste it, a complex, mellow flavor with just a hint of sourness, mingling with notes of honey and myrrh. It's both calming and invigorating, a little like an ancient aperitif meant to clear the palate and freshen the mouth. Nearby, a group of women laugh softly as they prepare similar mixtures for family use, carefully measuring spices like cumin and coriander, adding pounded lotus petals and a dash of natron to the blend. This concoction is left to rest under the warm sun, transforming slowly into a potent breath freshener. You recall the earlier mention of natron's dual role in cleansing and mummification, a substance that cleansed the body in life and prepared it for the afterlife.
In these breath mints, natron was a secret ingredient that might have helped purify the mouth, protecting against decay and discomfort. As you sit by the water, the setting sun casts shimmering reflections, and the sounds of frogs croaking and birds calling mingle with the distant hum of village life. You imagine the ancient Egyptians enjoying these fermented mints at the end of a meal, savoring not just the flavor, but the ritual of refreshment. A curious detail emerges as you listen to a storyteller nearby. Some believed that fermented breath sweeteners could also serve as mild remedies for throat ailments or digestive discomfort, a fascinating blend of pleasure and practical medicine. You think back to the other breath care methods, the resin gums, the herb bundles, the sweet lozenges, and realize that the ancient Egyptians crafted an entire sensory experience around breath, intertwining taste, smell, health, and social grace. Your tongue still tingles with the memory of that syrupy date wine mix, a gentle reminder that sometimes the simplest ingredients, when combined with care, can create something truly special.
The Nile's waters ripple softly beneath the stars now, carrying with them the quiet stories of a people who mastered not just the monumental, but the intimate, crafting breath mints that soothed, refreshed, and connected across the ages. The sun rises slowly over the city's rooftops, and you find yourself in a shadowed workshop tucked away behind tall adobe walls. Here, artisans and apothecaries craft the precious breath mints using a mix of science and art passed down through generations. The air is thick with the scent of crushed herbs, resin, and honey, and the rhythmic sound of mortar and pestle fills the room. You watch as an apothecary carefully measures powdered myrrh and frankincense, mixing them with finely ground cinnamon and a touch of crushed peppermint leaves. This blend is then combined with honey and a small amount of natron, producing a thick paste. The paste is pressed into small molds, sometimes shaped like lotus flowers, other times as simple discs, and left to dry in the warm sun. Historians still argue whether these breath mints were primarily medicinal remedies, luxury items for the wealthy, or everyday hygiene tools accessible to many. The diversity of findings in different archaeological sites suggests that the answer might be all of the above. As you touch one of the drying mints, you feel its grainy texture, slightly sticky but firm. You imagine carrying a small box of these in your pouch or pocket as you go about your day, discreetly freshening your breath before important meetings or temple visits. Nearby, a young apprentice stirs a large jar of resinous gum that will soon be chewed or dissolved as a breath freshener. The process of extracting and preparing this gum is delicate. Too much heat and it loses its aroma. Too little and it remains sticky and unpleasant. You recall from earlier that resin chewing was not just about fresh breath, but also had dental benefits. Chewing gum today may be modern, but the Egyptians were among the first to discover its soothing, cleansing qualities centuries ago. A quirky detail you overhear involves the use of crocodile dung in some medicinal pastes, not for breath, but as a sunscreen. It's a strange reminder that ancient remedies balanced between the practical, the symbolic, and the bizarre. You chuckle softly, glad the crocodile dung was not part of the breath mint recipe. The apothecary explains that the drying process could take days, but the end result was worth the wait. A small, fragrant mint that could last weeks, releasing subtle aromas when gently dissolved in the mouth. You taste a sample. The flavor is complex, sweet from the honey, warm from cinnamon, fresh from peppermint, with an earthy undertone from the resin. It's like a tiny, ancient treasure, both a comfort and a delicacy. As the afternoon light filters through the small window, you feel a connection to these ancient artisans, their quiet devotion to craft, and their understanding that freshness of breath was about care, presence, and a little luxury in everyday life. The workshop, you step out into a quiet garden, the air fragrant with blooming jasmine and the soft rustle of papyrus reeds by the water's edge. This garden is a sacred place, where priests and priestesses gather not just to pray, but to prepare special breath fresheners used during rituals and temple ceremonies. You watch as a priestess delicately crushes dried lotus petals, blending them with powdered myrrh and frankincense. She mixes the dry ingredients with a small amount of honey and a drop of essential oils extracted from cedarwood and sweet basil. This sacred blend is formed into tiny pellets used to refresh breath during long hours of chanting and meditation. Historians still argue whether these ritual breath fresheners were meant more for spiritual purification or practical use during lengthy temple duties. The consensus leans toward a blend of both, as breath was considered a reflection of the soul's purity. You notice the priestess placing these pellets into small, ornately carved alabaster jars, sealed with wax to preserve their fragrance. The jars themselves are works of art, decorated with lotus motifs and hieroglyphs, invoking protection and health. Nearby, a temple musician pauses between notes to chew a resin gum infused with cinnamon and mint, believed to help maintain vocal clarity and soothe the throat. You imagine the soft murmur of music blending with the gentle rustling of leaves in this sacred space. The connection between breath and spiritual presence is clear here. Fresh breath wasn't just polite, it was a form of offering to the gods. A curious detail emerges as you listen to a passing conversation. Some temple workers believed that certain herbs in the breath mints had the power to ward off negative spirits and bring good luck. This belief adds another layer to the importance of breath care in ancient Egypt. You take a deep breath, inhaling the mingled scents of honey, herbs, and incense, feeling the calm wash over you like a gentle breeze. As the afternoon sun dips low, you reflect on the intricate balance of function and faith in these ancient practices. Breath fresheners were not just about masking odor, they were woven into the spiritual fabric of daily life. You smile softly, recalling the many forms of breath care you've encountered, from lozenges to fermented syrups to fragrant herb bundles. Each method a small testament to the Egyptians' careful attention to life's details. The garden's quiet serenity invites you to pause, breathe. As twilight settles, you find yourself inside a grand but dimly lit banquet hall. The flickering light of oil lamps casts soft shadows on the walls adorned with colorful frescoes of gods, banquets, and daily life. Here, among the well-to-do, breath mints took on a new role, not only for health, but as symbols of refinement and status. You imagine a nobleman reclining on an elegant couch, reaching for a small box carved from ivory or precious wood. Inside lie delicate discs made from honey, cinnamon, and rare imported spices like cardamom and saffron. These breath mints are treasured, their recipes jealously guarded by the elite families who prize both their flavor and their social symbolism. Historians still debate how widely available these luxury mints were outside the wealthy classes, but it's clear that in such circles, fresh breath was linked to good manners and personal prestige. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some nobles reportedly added tiny amounts of crushed gold leaf or powdered lapis lazuli to their mints, not for taste, but to impress guests with shimmering flecks. Breath mints as both indulgence and jewelry for the mouth. You laugh quietly at the idea, picturing someone mid-conversation with a subtle sparkle on their tongue. Nearby, servants circulate trays of sweet wine and aromatic herbs, refreshing guests after lavish meals heavy with garlic and onions. The scent of freshly baked bread and roasted meats lingers in the air, making breath care all the more necessary. You notice that many mints also include a pinch of cumin or coriander, spices known to aid digestion and reduce unpleasant odors from rich feasts. A scholar sitting nearby comments on the links between breath freshening and diplomacy. Offering a mint was sometimes a way to signal goodwill or smooth social tensions during delicate negotiations. You take a mint yourself, savoring its complex blend of warmth, sweetness, and a faint herbal coolness. It's like tasting the very essence of an ancient feast, where every detail mattered. As you lean back into the soft cushions, the murmurs of conversation and clinking of cups create a soothing backdrop. The breath mint, small but mighty, has bridged the gap between survival, ceremony, and social grace. The night deepens, and you feel the gentle embrace of history's quiet moments, those small, fragrant rituals that made ancient Egypt's world just a little fresher. Outside, the warm desert night hums softly with the chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of palm leaves. You wander through a bustling market, alive with muted voices and the scents of spices, resins, and freshly ground herbs. It's here, amid the vibrant stalls, that the everyday breath mint finds its way into common life. You watch a vendor skillfully wrapping tiny parcels of dried herbs, mint, coriander, and rue, into palm leaves tied with flax twine. These little bundles, easily carried in a pocket or tied to a belt, are offered to travelers and townsfolk alike to refresh breath after long journeys or dusty days. Historians still debate how far these portable breath mints traveled. Did they journey along the trade routes as far as Nubia or the Mediterranean? The evidence suggests a lively exchange of ideas and ingredients, even if the mint recipes adapted to local tastes. You sample one of the herbal parcels and feel the cool, slightly bitter taste mingle with a faint sweetness from a dab of date syrup smeared inside. It's a humble but effective remedy, a breath refresher born of necessity and ingenuity. Nearby, a group of children play while their mothers barter over baskets of figs and loaves of barley bread. The laughter and chatter weave a comforting background hum, grounding you in the everyday life of ancient Egypt. You overhear a tale about breath guards, small amulets sometimes worn or carried to protect one's breath and health, part superstition, part health advice. This overlap of belief and hygiene highlights the fascinating mix of science and spirituality in Egyptian culture. As the market winds down, you pause by a small shrine where offerings of incense and fragrant oils are left to honor the gods of health and purification. You reflect on how breath care was woven through all levels of society, from the grand temples and palaces to the dusty streets and bustling markets, each person, in their own way, seeking comfort, freshness, and connection. You tuck one of the small herb bundles into your own pocket, a simple talisman from a time long past. The night deepens, the market quiets, and you are gently carried forward on the current of ancient life, where every breath was a small, deliberate act of care. Outside, the warm desert night hums softly with the chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of palm leaves. You wander through a bustling market, alive with muted voices and the scents of spices, resins, and freshly ground herbs. It's here, amid the vibrant stalls, that the everyday breath mint finds its way into common life. You watch a vendor skillfully wrapping tiny parcels of dried herbs, mint, coriander, and rue, into palm leaves tied with flax twine. These little bundles, easily carried in a pocket or tied to a belt, are offered to travelers and townsfolk alike to refresh breath after long journeys or dusty days. Historians still debate how far these portable breath mints traveled. Did they journey along the trade routes as far as Nubia or the Mediterranean? The evidence suggests a lively exchange of ideas and ingredients, even if the mint recipes adapted to local tastes. You sample one of the herbal parcels and feel the cool, slightly bitter taste mingle with a faint sweetness from a dab of date syrup smeared inside. It's a humble but effective remedy, a breath refresher born of necessity and ingenuity. Nearby, a group of children play while their mothers barter over baskets of figs and loaves of barley bread. The laughter and chatter weave a comforting background hum, grounding you in the everyday life of ancient Egypt. You overhear a tale about breath guards, small amulets sometimes worn or carried to protect one's breath and health, part superstition, part health advice. This overlap of belief and hygiene highlights the fascinating mix of science and spirituality in Egyptian culture. As the market winds down, you pause by a small shrine where offerings of incense and fragrant oils are left to honor the gods of health and purification. You reflect on how breath care was woven through all levels of society, from the grand temples and palaces to the dusty streets and bustling markets, each person, in their own way, seeking comfort, freshness, and connection. You tuck one of the small herb bundles into your own pocket, a simple talisman from a time long past. The night deepens, the market quiets, and you are gently carried forward on the current of ancient life, where every breath was a small, deliberate act of care. Dawn edges its soft light over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the sprawling cityscape. You find yourself back where you began, the quiet workshop, now filled with early morning sounds, the chatter of apprentices, the scraping of tools, the faint aroma of honey and herbs. You reflect on the incredible journey breath mints took in ancient Egypt, from sacred rituals in temple gardens, through bustling markets, to noble banquets and riverside laborers. Each layer of society embraced its own version of freshness, a testament to the importance placed on personal care and subtle luxury. Historians still debate many details. How widespread were these practices? How exactly were ingredients sourced and traded? And what cultural meanings breath mints held beyond hygiene? But what remains clear is the Egyptians' remarkable blend of science, spirituality, and daily practicality. You smile softly, remembering the tiny golden flecks in elite mints, the herbal bundles tied with flax, and the resin chewed by temple singers. Each fact, quirky detail, and whispered legend weaves together a rich tapestry of life long past, now gently resting in your mind like a soft melody. As the city stirs awake, you feel a quiet gratitude for the small comforts that transcend time, like the simple pleasure of fresh breath and the care it represents. Your mind slows, the sounds of the workshop dim, and the ancient scents fade into a gentle, calming breeze. The world of pyramids and priests, merchants and musicians, closes softly around you. You are gently carried away on the whisper of history's breath. Now, as you lay back and the night deepens, feel the calmness settle like a soft veil over your thoughts. The echoes of ancient Egypt's quiet rituals fade slowly, leaving only gentle warmth and peaceful ease. Let your breath slow, in and out, steady and soft, just like the tender mints that soothed long ago lips. Rest assured, these small acts of care remind us that no matter how vast or ancient the world, comfort often comes in tiny, fragrant moments. Feel your body relax, your mind drifting ever deeper into softness. The quiet hum of history, the soft scents of honey and herbs, all wrap you in a soothing embrace. Let the calm wash over you like the Nile's gentle current, steady and serene. Tonight you rest with the knowledge that care, kindness, and gentle freshness are threads that connect us all across time